Chapter 23. Ollie Comes Home. The day that Ollie was expected at the cabin on Dewey Bald, Mr. Lane was busy in the field. "I don't reckon you'll need me at the house nohow," he said with a queer laugh as he rose from the dinner table, and Sammy, blushing, told him to go on about his work, or young Matt would get his planting done first. Jim went out to get his horse from the stable, but before he left, he turned once more to the house. "What is it, Daddy? Did you forget something?" asked Sammy as her father stood in the doorway. "Not exactly," drawled Jim. "I ain't got a very good forgetter. I wish I had. It's something I can't forget, and I wish I could." In a moment, the girl's arms were tied about his neck. "You dear, foolish old Daddy Jim. I have a bad forgetter, too. You thought when I began studying with Dad Howitt that my books would make me forget you. Well, have they?" A tightening of the long arm about her waist was the only answer. "And now you're making yourself miserable trying to think that Ollie Stewart and his friends will make me forget you. Just as if all the folks in the world could ever be to me what you are. You, Dad, and Uncle Matt, and Aunt Molly, and young Matt. Daddy, I'm ashamed of you. Honest, I am. Do you think a genuine lady could ever forget the father who was so good to her? I'm insulted. You must apologize immediately." She pretended to draw away, but the long arm held her fast while the mountaineer said in a voice that had in it a pride and a pain with a world of love. I know, girl, but you'll be a living away in the city when you and Ollie are married, and these old hills, they'll be mighty lonesome with you gone. You see, I couldn't never leave the old place. 'Tain't much, I know, but as far as money value goes, but there's some things that worth a heap more than their money value, I suppose. If you was ever going to live where I could ride over once a week to see you, it'd be different." "Yes, Daddy, but maybe I won't go after all. I'm not married yet, you know." Something in her voice or manner caused Jim to hold his daughter at arm's length and look full into the brown eyes. "What do you mean, girl?" Sammy laughed in an uneasy, embarrassed way. She was not sure that she herself knew all that lay beneath the simple words, and she tried to explain. "Why, I mean that Ollie and I had both grown up since we promised, and he's been living way out in the big world, going to school besides. He must have seen many girls since he's left me, and he is sure to have changed greatly, and maybe he won't want a backwoods wife." The man growled something below his breath, and the girl placed a hand over his lips. "Oh, you mustn't say swear words, Daddy Jim. Indeed, you mustn't. Not in the presence of ladies, anyway." "You've changed a heap in some ways, too," said Jim. "Yeah, I suppose I have. But my changes are mostly on the inside, and perhaps he won't see them." Would you care so much, Sammy?" whispered the father. "Well, that's just it, Daddy. How can I tell? We must begin all over again, don't you see?" Then Sammy sent him away to his work. Sammy had finished washing the dinner dishes and was putting things in order about the house when she stopped suddenly before the little shelf that held her books. Then, with a smile, she carried them every one into her own room and placed them carefully where they couldn't be seen from the open door. Going next to the mirror, she deliberately took down her hair and arranged it in the old careless way that Ollie had always known. "You're just the same backwoods girl, Sammy Lane, so far as outside things go," she said to the face in the glass. "But you're not quite the same all the way through. We'll see if he She was interrupted by the loud barking of the dog outside, and her heart beat quickly as a voice cried, "Hello, hello, I say, call off your dog." Sammy hurried to the door. A strange gentleman stood at the gate. The strangest gentleman that Sammy had ever seen. Surely this couldn't be Ollie Stewart, this slender, pale-faced, with faultless linen, well-gloved hands, and shining patent leathers. The girl drew back in embarrassment. But there was no hesitation on the part of the young man. Before she could recover from her astonishment, he caught her in her arms and kissed her again and again until she struggled from his embrace. You mustn't," she gasped. "Why not?" he demanded laughingly. "Has anyone a better right? I've been waiting a long while for this. I mean to make up for lost time." He took a step towards her again, but Sammy held him off at arm's length as she repeated, "No, no, you mustn't. Not now." Young Stewart was helpless, and the discovery that she was stronger than this man brought to the girl a strange feeling, as of shame. "How strong you are," he said petulantly, ceasing his efforts. And then, carefully surveying the splendidly proportioned and developed young woman, he added, "And how beautiful." Under his look, Sammy's face flushed painfully, even to her neck and brow, and the man, seeing her confusion, laughed again. Then seated himself in the only rocking chair in the room. The young gentleman leisurely removed his gloves and looked round the while with an amused expression on his face, while the girl stood watching him. At last he said impatiently, Sit down, Sammy. You look at me as if I was a ghost." Unconsciously she slipped into the speech of the old days. "You sure don't look much like you used to. I never seen nobody wear such clothes as them. Not even Dad Howitt when he first come. Do you wear them every day?" Ollie frowned. "You're just like all the rest, Sammy. Why don't you talk as you write? You've improved a lot in your letters. If you talk like that in the city, people will know in a minute that you're from the country." At this, Sammy rallied her scattered wits, and the wide, questioning look was in her eyes as she replied quietly, "Thank you. I'll try to remember. But tell me, please, what harm could it do if people knew that I came from the country?" It was Ollie's turn to be amazed. "Why, you can talk," he said. "Where did you learn?" And the girl answered simply as she picked it up from the old shepherd. This little incident put Sammy more at ease, and she skillfully led her companion to speak of the city and his life there. Of his studies the young fellow had little to say, and to her secret delight, the girl found that she had actually made greater progress with her books than had her lover with all of the supposed advantages. But of all the other gaieties and excitements of the greater city, of his new home, the wealth of his uncle, and his own bright prospects, Ollie spoke freely, not dreaming the girl had already seen the life he painted in such glowing colors through the eyes of one who had been careful to point out the froth and foam of it all. Neither did the young man discover in the quiet questions she asked that Sammy was seeking to know what in all this new world he had found that he could make his own as the thing that most worth while. The backwoods girl had never seen that type of man to whom the life of city only is life. Ollie was particularly fitted by nature to absorb quickly those things of the world into which he had gone that were most different from the world he had left, and there remained scarcely a trace of his earlier wilderness training. But there is that in life that lays too deep for any mere change of environment to touch, and Sammy remembered a lesson the shepherd had given her. A gentle spirit may express itself in the rude words of literacy. It is not therefore rude. Ruffianism may speak the language of learning, of religion. It is ruffian still. Strength may wear the garb of weakness and still be strong, and a weakling may carry the weapons of strength, but fight with a faint heart. So, beneath all the changes that had come to her backwoods lover, Sammy felt that Ollie himself was unchanged. It was as though he had learned a new language, but still said the same things. Sammy, too, had entered a new world. Step by step, as the young man had advanced in his schooling and, dropping the habits and customs of the backwoods, had conformed in his outward life to his new environment, the girl had advanced in her education under the careful hand of the old shepherd. Ignorant still of the false standards and petty ambitions that were so large a part of the complex world into which he had gone, she had been introduced to a world where the life itself is the only thing worth while. She had seen nothing of the glittering tinsel of that cheap culture that is death to all true refinement, but in the daily companionship of her gentle teacher, she had lived in touch with true aristocracy, the aristocracy of heart and spirit. Young Matt and Jim had thought that, in Sammy's education, the bond between the girl and her lover would strengthen. They had thought to see her growing further and further from the life of the hills to the life to which they felt they must always belong. But that was because young Matt and Jim didn't know the kind of education the girl was getting. So Ollie had come back to his old home to measure things by his new standard, and he'd come back to be measured according to the old standard. If the man's eyes were dimmed by the flash and sparkle that play upon the surface of life, the woman's vision was strong and clear to look into the still depths. Later in the day, as they walked together up the old trail to Sammy's lookout, the girl tried to show him some of the things that had been revealed to her in the past months. But the young fellow could not follow where she led, and answered her always with some flippant remark or with the superficial philosophy of his kind. When he tried to turn the talk to their future, she skilfully defeated his purpose or was silent, and when he would claim a lover's privilege, she held off. Upon his demanding a reason for her coldness, she answered, "Don't you see that everything is different now? We must learn to know each other all over again." "But you're my promised wife." "I promised to be the wife of a backwoodsman," she answered. "I cannot keep that promise, for that man is dead. You're a man of the city now, and I am scarcely acquainted with you." Young Stuart found himself not a little puzzled by the situation. He had come home expecting to find a girl beautiful in face and form, but with the mind of a child, to wonder at the things that he would tell her. He had found instead a thoughtful young woman trained to look for and recognize truth and beauty. Sammy, always his physical superior, she was now his intellectual superior as well. The change that had come to her was not a change of environment of the things that lay upon the surface, but it was a change in the deeper things of life, in the purpose and understanding of life itself. Like many of his kind, Ollie could not distinguish between the things. End of chapter 23.